your things and leave this house. I want you out of this house right now.
Just those 11 words, delivered the way you tell a house girl her services are no longer needed. Kemi looked up from the kitchen where she was cooking, her kitchen, with her pots, on her stove, and for a moment she thought she had misheard. I'm sorry. You heard me. Mama Rotimi stepped fully into the kitchen doorway, arms folded, voice flat. This house belongs to this family. Rotimi is gone. You are no longer our concern. Kemi's hand was still holding the wooden spoon. The soup she had been stirring, egusi, Rotimi's favorite, because she still cooked it out of habit, because grief is strange like that, was still bubbling on the fire. 7 days. Her husband had been in the ground for 7 days. Mama, don't call me that. The older woman's eyes were cold in a way Kemi had never seen before, or maybe she had seen it before and chosen not to believe it. I am not your mother. I was never your mother. You were Rotimi's wife. Rotimi is dead. What exactly do you think you are now? The words hit like a slap. From the parlor, Kemi could hear the television. Toby had put on cartoons for Blessing, trying to keep her distracted, the way 7-year-old boys try to protect their little sisters without fully understanding from what. The baby moved inside her, 8 months pregnant, and her mother-in-law was standing in her kitchen telling her to get out. Kemi set down the spoon. She turned fully to face this woman she had cooked for, prayed for, served on her knees at traditional ceremonies, called Mama for 5 years. I am not going anywhere, Kemi said quietly. Mama Rotimi smiled, and that smile, calm, certain, almost pitying, was more frightening than any shout could have been. We'll see, she said, and walked away. Standing in that kitchen with her dead husband's soup on the fire and her unborn child pressing against her ribs, Kemi understood something that shook her to her core. This woman had been waiting. Through the illness, through the funeral, through the crying and the condolences and the burial, she had been waiting for exactly this moment. But let me take you back to where this story really begins, because you need to understand what Kemi built before you can understand what they tried to take from her. Kemi Adeyemi did not come from money. She came from Abeokuta, from a family of 5 children and 2 hard-working parents who made sure their children never slept hungry even when they themselves went to bed with little. Her father drove a commercial bus on the Abeokuta-Lagos route for 22 years. Her mother sold Ankara fabric at Itaoshi Market from 6 in the morning until the light faded. They were the kind of parents who worked themselves to the bone quietly, without complaint, without asking for applause, because that was simply what love looked like in their home. Kemi was the 3rd child, and she learned everything at her mother's market stall. How to count money fast, how to read a customer, how to hold your price when someone tries to drag it down, how to smile when you are tired, how to keep going when keeping going is the only option you have. She was 19 when her father's back gave out, and he could no longer drive. The family income fell by more than half overnight. Kemi's older brother was in university. Her younger siblings were still in secondary school. Without a single conversation about it, Kemi simply stepped up, increasing her hours at her mother's store, taking on extra tailoring work in the evenings, quietly redirecting money she had been saving for her own school fees to keep her younger ones in school. She told no one. That was the kind of woman she was. She did not carry her sacrifice around like a badge. She simply did what needed doing. She got to Polytechnic 2 years later than she planned, on a scholarship she applied for 4 times before she got it. She studied business administration and graduated with a distinction, and on the day her result was announced, she sat in the corridor outside the administrative office and allowed herself exactly 5 minutes of private tears. Not from sadness, but from the particular relief of someone who has been holding her breath for a long time. She moved to Lagos at 24 with 12,000 naira, a phone with a cracked screen, and a contact for a woman who rented rooms in Ikorodu. Lagos is not a city that welcomes you. It simply opens its mouth and waits to see if you will be swallowed or if you will climb out. Kemi climbed. She worked in a fabric shop in Balogun Market for 2 years, learning the wholesale side of the trade, building contacts, watching how the big women moved. Then she started her own business, buying Ankara fabrics at source and supplying to boutiques and tailors across Lagos Island. It was slow. There were months when she wondered if she had made a mistake. There were days when she ate once and told herself she was not hungry. But the business grew because she worked it like her life depended on it, which in a very real way, it did. She met Rotimi Adeleke at a trade fair in Echo Hotel on a bright Saturday in March. She was arguing with a supplier, calmly, precisely, with the kind of controlled firmness that comes from knowing exactly what you are worth, when she became aware that someone was watching her. She finished her negotiation, got the price she wanted, and turned to find a man leaning at the next stall with a look on his face that she could not immediately name. Admiration, she realized later. Genuine admiration, not the kind men perform to get something, the real kind. "You are very good at that," he said. "I know," she said, and walked on. He found her again at the event lunch. He introduced himself properly. Rotimi Adeleke, building materials, 2 depots in Lagos, working on a 3rd. He was 31, solid and straightforward in the way of men who have worked hard for everything they have and are not embarrassed by it. He made her laugh twice in the first hour, which she had not expected. They exchanged numbers. He called the next day. Their relationship was not a fairy tale. It was something better. It was real. They disagreed about things and worked through them. They supported each other's businesses the way partners do. He drove her to the hospital when she had malaria and stayed until the drip was finished. She sat with him through the night when his first depot nearly flooded during a heavy storm season. They built something together, slowly, with both hands. The only thing that was never quite right was his family. Mama Rotimi was a formidable woman, tall, well-dressed, commanding in every room she entered. She had raised 3 children largely alone after her husband's early death, and she wore that sacrifice like armor. She loved Rotimi with a fierce, consuming love of a mother who has poured everything into one vessel, and she had very clear ideas about the kind of woman who should have him. Kemi, with her market background and her Abeokuta family and her business that she had built from nothing, Kemi was not that woman. Mama Rotimi never said this directly. She was too clever for directness. But Kemi felt it in the pauses, in the way the older woman's eyes moved over her at family gatherings, in the questions that were asked with honey in the voice but thorns underneath. Where exactly is your family from? Your father, you said he drove a bus, and your mother, she still sells in the market. Not cruel, exactly. Just calibrating, just reminding Kemi politely of the distance between where she came from and where she arrived. She just needs time to know you, Rotimi always said. Kemi smiled and said nothing because she understood something that Rotimi, in his love for both women, could not quite see. Some people do not need time. They have already decided. They married in December, a large Lagos wedding that Kemi's mother cried through from beginning to end. Rotimi wore a cream agbada that his tailor had worked on for 3 weeks. Kemi wore ivory lace that she and her mother had sourced together over 3 Saturdays, touching fabrics in silence, both of them understanding without speaking what this moment meant for a woman who started with 12,000 naira and a cracked phone. They moved to the house in Magodu. Rotimi had been building it for 3 years before they married, a 4-bedroom detached house on a quiet street, added to slowly as money allowed. The mortgage was in his name because the bank required it. That small detail, his name, not theirs, was the crack in the foundation that nobody saw until it was too late. But in those early years, it was simply home. She chose the tiles, she sourced the kitchen fittings, she planted the bougainvillea along the fence and a mango tree in the back garden the month Blessing was born, pressing the seed into the soil with her bare hands because she wanted something living, something rooted, something that said, "We are staying." Toby came first, then Blessing. The house filled with noise and toys and the particular beautiful chaos of children. Rotimi's business expanded. Kemi's fabric business grew to the point where she had 2 girls working with her. They talked about a 2nd floor. They were building a life, a real solid rooted life. Then the headaches began. Rotimi was not a man who admitted weakness easily. This was not arrogance, it was upbringing. His mother had run a household on willpower and stubbornness, and she had passed both to her son along with her cheekbones and her dry humor. When the headache started, he took Panadol and kept moving. When they got worse, he reduced his hours slightly and said it was stress. When Kemi sat across from him one evening and told him very quietly that she was not asking, she was telling him he was going to the hospital, he recognized the tone. He had learned 5 years into marriage which of Kemi's quiets were flexible and which ones were not. He went. The word they eventually used was glioblastoma. Stage 3, moving toward 4, aggressive and fast-growing, and already more advanced than anyone had suspected, while Rotimi was taking Panadol and attributing it to stress. Kemi heard that word and felt the floor of the world tilt, but she did not fall. She opened her notebook. She always had a notebook, and she wrote down everything the doctor said. Every word. She asked questions until the doctor had no more answers, and then she asked for referrals to people who might have more. She was 8 weeks pregnant with their 3rd child when they got the diagnosis, a fact she had not yet told Rotimi because she had been waiting for the right moment. And now there was no right moment, only the two of them in a hospital office holding the worst news of their lives. She told him in the car on the way home. She did not plan to, it simply came out because she could not sit beside him carrying 2 things that heavy at once. He was quiet for a long time. Then he put his hand over hers on the gear shift. God is in control, he said. She did not say what she was thinking, which was that she needed God to also be very specific about which parts he was controlling, because she needed to understand exactly what she was working with. Instead, she held his hand and drove. They fought the illness together. 2 surgeries, chemotherapy that reduced Rotimi to a shadow of himself for months at a time, a traditional medicine specialist his aunties insisted on, whose treatments Kemi administered without belief but without argument, because if it gave Rotimi hope, it was worth the smell. A specialist in Abuja they flew to twice, alternative consultations, prayer sessions, everything. They tried everything. Kemi ran both businesses during this period. She managed the children, managed the medical bills, managed the household, sat with Rotimi through the night when the pain was at its worst, held his hand when the medication made him confused and afraid. She did all of this while pregnant, while terrified, while refusing to show the terror because she had decided consciously on a night when she sat alone in the bathroom and had it out with herself that Rotimi needed someone steady. She would be steady. She could fall apart later. It was during big illness that Mama Rotimi began to appear more often. A mother wanting to be near her sick son, of course, what could be more natural? Kemi made the spare room comfortable. She cooked extra. She was respectful and welcoming because whatever her private reservations about this woman, Rotimi needed his mother, and that was what mattered. Folake and Sade came on weekends. The sisters, Folake was 34, sharp-tongued and ambitious. Sade was 30, quieter but watchful, filled the house with a presence that gradually shifted its atmosphere. Small things changed. The way conversations stopped when Kemi entered a room. The way decisions about Rotimi's care were increasingly discussed between the family without her, then presented to her afterward as settled conclusions. She noticed. She noticed Folakem one Sunday, sitting very close to Rotimi on the sofa, speaking to him in low Yoruba that was slow enough for Kemi to follow, asking him about the depot accounts, about which lawyer handled his business documents, about whether he had thought about arrangements. She noticed Mama Rotimi asking Rotimi with her hand on his face whether he had made sure everything was in order for the family. She noticed Sade asking Kemi sweetly, with her head tilted, "Does your family know how serious things are? Are you in contact with them? You should make sure you have support, for afterwards." For afterwards. Kemi brought it to Rotimi on a Tuesday evening that was one of his better days. She sat beside him and she chose her words carefully. "Your family is asking questions about the house and the business." Rotimi sighed. He looked tired, in the deep way people are tired of more than just their body. They are worried, Kemi. I know they're worried about you, but what they're asking, they're worried about you. He turned to look at her. About what happens to you and the children if I... Rotimi, we have to talk about it. His voice was gentle but firm. The house is in my name, the depot too. I need to see a lawyer and make sure everything is properly arranged for you and the children. I haven't done it yet and I should have done it already. And... Okay, she said softly. Okay, make the appointment. Next week. I'll call Mr. Fashola next week. She believed him completely. She had no reason not to. In 5 years of marriage, Rotimi Adeleke never promised her something he did not deliver. He never made it to that appointment. He collapsed at the Ojota depot on a Thursday morning 6 weeks later. One moment, he was talking to Sunday, his manager. The next, he was on the floor. By the time the ambulance reached the hospital, he was unconscious. He never woke up. He was 37 years old. The days after are a blur that Kemi will carry for the rest of her life. On the 9th day after the burial, the last of the visiting relatives left. Kemi finally had her house to herself, or thought she did. Mama Rotimi, Folake and Shade had stayed on, which she had accepted without question. Of course they would stay a while longer. Of course. That evening, as Kemi came out of the kitchen, Mama Rotimi was sitting in the parlor waiting for her. Folake was to the right. Shade was by the window. They had arranged themselves, Kemi realized, like people who had rehearsed this, like people who had been waiting for exactly this moment. "Sit down," Mama Rotimi said. "We need to talk." And so Kemi heard, for the first time, the sentence that would try to end her life as she knew it. The house had to go back to the family. She had no legal claim. She had 1 month to find alternative accommodation. They were generous people. They would give her some money to start, but the house, the depot, the company accounts, all of it would be transferred to the family. Kemi listened to all of it without speaking. When Mama Rotimi finished, the room was very quiet. 5 years, Kemi said finally. Her voice was low. I was in this marriage for 5 years. I cooked in this kitchen. I slept in that bedroom. I raised my children in this house. I sat with your son through every night he was in pain. I held his hand when he couldn't remember where he was. I ran his business when he was too sick to stand. She paused. And you are sitting in my parlor telling me to leave? Mama Rotimi's face did not change. It is not your parlor. I painted these walls with my son's money. With money I also earned. With money from my own business that I built from scratch before I ever met your son. Kemi's voice was shaking now and she let it shake. Where is this coming from? We buried him 9 days ago. 9 days and you are here with this? Folake leaned forward. We are being kind, actually. We could have said this at the gate the day he died. We gave you time to grieve. Kemi stared at her. You gave me time to grieve? The law is the law, Shade said from the window, her voice flat. The house is in his name. Without a will, the estate goes to the family. You should have made sure he wrote a will. That is not our fault. Something happened inside Kemi in that moment. Something shifted from grief into something sharper and colder and much more useful. Because she understood, finally, completely, with no part of her still hoping she was wrong. These women had known about the will. Or rather, they had known there was no will and they had made sure it stayed that way. The questions during the illness, the visits, sitting close to Rotimi, asking about lawyers, not to help him arrange his affairs, to monitor whether he had and to ensure that he hadn't. They had watched his husband dying and they had used that time to position themselves. Get out of my house, Kemi said. The temperature in the room changed. Mama Rotimi stood slowly. I will leave tonight, but this conversation is not over. And when it is over, she straightened her wrapper with the deliberate calm of a woman absolutely certain of her position. You will be the one who is gone. They left, all 3 of them, filing out into the night. Kemi sat in the parlor alone. From the bedroom, she could hear Toby's voice, low and steady. She realized he was telling Blessing his story, making one up on the spot to keep her settled, to keep her from asking why the house felt strange tonight. 7 years old, already protecting his sister from things she didn't understand. Kemi pressed her hand flat against her stomach. The baby moved. She sat there for a long time, and then slowly she reached for her phone. She had a number, a lawyer she had met at a business networking event 3 years ago, a small, precise woman named Mrs. Adunola Bello, who handed Kemi her card and said, with a directness Kemi had admired, "Keep this. You never know when a woman needs a good lawyer." Kemi kept it. She called. Mrs. Bello picked up on the third ring. Kemi told her everything, the whole story, from the hospital to the burial to the parlor ambush, without breaking down, because she had learnt long ago that emotion and clarity cannot always occupy the same space at the same time, and right now she needed clarity more than ever. Mrs. Bello listened without interrupting. When Kemi finished, the room was very quiet. 5 years, Kemi said finally. Her voice was low. "Do you have your marriage certificate?" "Yes." "The children's birth certificates?" "Yes." "Any documentation of your contribution to the household, bills, receipts, anything in your name?" "I have years of them. I was always organized with paperwork." Another brief pause. "Good. Come to my office tomorrow at 10. And Kemi," her voice shifted almost imperceptibly into something warmer, "do not leave that house. Whatever they say, whatever they do not voluntarily step outside that gate." Kemi sat with her children that night, Toby on her left, Blessing on her right, the baby moving steadily inside her, and she made them a quiet promise, not out loud. She was not the kind of woman who made speeches. She made it the way she made all her important decisions, in silence, in private, with complete certainty. "I am not moving." The weeks that followed were a kind of war. Mama Rotimi returned 3 days later with a property lawyer and a document she said transferred the house to the family estate. Kemi stood in the doorway and said very calmly, "My lawyer will respond to that." Folake came twice with ultimatums wrapped in scripture. God would bless Kemi for being humble. God would honor her sacrifice if she stepped aside gracefully. Shade stopped coming personally and instead began calling Kemi's phone at odd hours, saying nothing, then hanging up. The gate padlock was changed while Kemi was at a doctor's appointment, and she came home to find herself locked out, stood at her own gate in the evening light with her 2 children beside her, 8 months pregnant, and had to call a locksmith to get back into her own home. That was the moment, standing at that gate, Toby holding Blessing's hand without being asked, both children very quiet, that Kemi stopped grieving and started fighting. She went to the depot the next morning. Sunday, the manager, received her with the careful eyes of a man who respects someone but is also afraid of what respecting them might cost him. Kemi sat with him for 3 hours. She went through every file, every ledger, every record she could access. What she found confirmed her worst suspicion. Money had been moving. A significant withdrawal from the company account made the week after the funeral, authorized by a signature that was not Rotimi's, not hers, and not Sunday's. She photographed everything. She sent the photographs to Mrs. Bello without comment. Mrs. Bello filed an injunction preventing any transfer of the property pending a court hearing. She filed a second document establishing the children as primary beneficiaries of their father's estate. She compiled Kemi's evidence into a submission that included the marriage certificate, the children's birth certificate, 7 years of utility bills in both names, receipts for renovation work, photographs of Kemi at the house during every stage of construction, a sworn statement from Sunday confirming Kemi's management of the business during Rotimi's illness, and the unauthorized account withdrawal records she had photographed at the depot. The family's lawyer responded by filing a counter-claim that the house was purchased entirely with Rotimi's income and that Kemi's business had no verifiable connection to the household finances. Mrs. Bello responded by producing Kemi's business records, showing the exact months Kemi's business income had covered the household bills when Rotimi's illness reduced his working capacity. She produced bank statements, she produced receipts, she produced the truth, systematically, document by document, because the truth and Kemi's obsessive record keeping had always been the same thing. The baby came on a rainy Thursday in November. A boy, furious and loud from his first breath, which made the midwife say, "This one came ready for something." Kemi named him Rotimi, the second Rotimi, the one who would grow up knowing his father only through stories and photographs, but who would grow up in his father's house. She was going to make certain of that. The court hearing was 3 months after the baby. Kemi dressed carefully that morning. She put on her best Ankara not to perform, but because she had learned from her mother that how you present yourself in the room says something before you open your mouth. She fed the baby, settled the children with her cousin who had come to help, and drove herself to the courthouse in Victoria Island with her folder of documents on the seat beside her. Mama Rotimi was already in the corridor when she arrived. The older woman looked at her once, a long measuring look, and then looked away. Folaki and Shade sat together, not speaking. The hearing lasted most of the day. Kemi sat beside Mrs. Bello and answered the judge's questions directly, without embellishment, without drama. She told the truth in the same clear, organized way she had told it to Mrs. Bello on the phone 3 months ago, the same way she had kept records and managed accounts and run a business from a market stall education, precisely, completely, leaving nothing out. The judge was a woman in her late 50s who had the particular expression of someone who has heard every version of every story and is not impressed by performance, but is paying close attention to facts. She asked sharp questions of both sides. She reviewed the documents. She took everything under consideration. She gave her ruling 2 weeks later. Kemi was at home when Mrs. Bello called. She was in the kitchen making a bottle for baby Rotimi, Blessing sitting on the counter beside her, chattering about something that happened at her cousin's house. Toby doing homework at the kitchen table the way he always did, present, quiet, taking everything in. Her phone rang. She saw Mrs. Bello's name. She set down the bottle. "Kemi?" Mrs. Bello's voice was measured, but underneath the measure, something warm. The ruling came. "Tell me. The house remains under your custodial management until your youngest child reaches adulthood. Your children are confirmed as the primary beneficiaries of their father's estate, including the depot and all business assets. The unauthorized account withdrawal has been referred to the relevant authorities for further investigation." A pause. "They get nothing directly. Everything is held in trust for your children, administered by you." Kemi put her hand on the counter. "Kemi," Mrs. Bello said, "are you there?" "I'm here," she said. Her voice was steady. "Thank you." She put down the phone. Blessing was watching her with the focused curiosity of a 4-year-old trying to read an adult situation. Toby had stopped writing. He was looking at his mother with his father's eyes. "Did we win?" he asked. Kemi looked at his son. This boy who held his sister's hand at the gate without being asked. This boy who told her stories to keep her settled on the nights when everything was too heavy. This boy who had watched everything with those quiet, careful eyes and not once complained, cried in front of her, or asked a question she couldn't answer. "We won," she said. Toby nodded once. He picked up his pen. He went back to his homework. Kemi put her face in her hands and finally, completely, let herself cry. Not from sadness, but from the accumulated weight of every day she had held it together. Every night she had been afraid. Every morning she had gotten up and made breakfast and kept going because her children needed her to keep going. She cried for Rotimi, who had loved her and failed to protect her and was gone. She cried for the girl who moved to Lagos with 12,000 naira and built something real. She cried because it was over and she had won, and the cost of winning had been everything she had. Blessing climbed down from the counter and put her small arms around her mother's legs. She did not say anything. She just held on.
A month later, Kemi replanted the flowers along the front gate. The bougainvillea had survived everything. The distraction of grief, the weeks of not watering, the hands that had not tended it. It was wild and overgrown and more beautiful for it. She trimmed it back with Toby's help on a Saturday morning, the baby strapped to her back, Blessing getting soil on her clothes and laughing at herself. The mango tree in the back garden had fruit on it. Still green, still weeks from ripe, but there, actual, growing, proof of something that had been planted and tended and refused to die. Kemi stood under it for a moment with baby Rotimi warm and heavy on her back, listening to her children in the garden, feeling the sun on her face. She thought about Rotimi. She was still angry at him, gently, honestly, the way you are angry at someone you love who made a mistake they can no longer fix. He should have made the will. He knew. He had said he would. He hadn't. That fact was simply true, and she was going to carry it for a long time, alongside the love and the grief and the rest of it. But she had made a decision about how she was going to carry all of it, and that decision was this: not as a victim, not as someone to whom things had been done, as a woman who had built something, had it threatened, and had held her ground. Her mother called that evening. "Come home next weekend," her mother said. "Bring the children. I want to hold that baby." "I will," Kemi said. "Are you okay?" Kemi looked around her parlor. Her curtains, her tiles, her children's shoes by the door. Her life, intact, hard-won, hers. "I'm okay, Mama," she said. "I'm okay." They try to bury us in the places we have loved the most, because they know that is where we will fight the hardest to stay. But a woman who has built something with her own hands knows the difference between being buried and being planted. Kemi was planted, and everything planted eventually rises. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to subscribe to African Folktale with Buchi, like this video, and share it with your friends and family. Comment down below and tell us what you think. We really would love to know where you are watching from. And we want to ask you this: if your in-laws tried to take everything from you the way they tried to take from Kemi, what would you have done? Would you have fought, or would you have walked away? Tell us in the comments. Until next time, no matter who tries to bury you, may you always, always rise. Goodbye.